This is the first chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, a new spin-off that picks up 68 years after the end of the main story. It all begins with a log entry from space in the year 2086. An alien mothership called Naunax was hovering 30,000 meters above the state of Nevada. On board were 50,000 Simurians seeking to live on Earth as refugees. A three-eyed Simurian leader questioned the mention of Japan. He didn't understand why it was being brought up, since America is supposed to be the strongest country on the planet. Even so, an attendant clarified that America defers to Japan's authority when it comes to diplomatic missions. While touching his own forehead, the attendant managed to gain more information, and their leader wanted to know more. The attendant also had a third eye, but his third eye had a horizontal orientation. He discovered that there are people in Japan with powers similar to the Simurians, something that their leader had not expected. And on this planet, such people are known as Jujutsu sorcerers. So aliens are officially in JJK. And I'm sure some people aren't too keen on aliens invading so many stories, but I for one love anything to do with aliens in fiction. I feel like it gives creators an excuse to be more abstract and creative, and I'm always eager to learn the lore. Their leader's face wasn't totally revealed to us, but from what we have, there are definitely similarities to Sukuna. The orientation of his third eye and its surrounding markings certainly remind me of the symbol on Sukuna's forehead. This guy has long bluish nails, like we've also seen from Sukuna. Then there's his posture on the throne, along with the fact that he has something like bull horns on his head. And for Malevolent Shrine, Sukuna was surrounded by a bunch of bull skulls. For Jujutsu Shosen, a sort of proto-JJK, Sukuna actually had bullish horns. But unlike Sukuna, this guy seems to have very elongated earlobes that are pierced like the side of a spiral notebook. And while this guy doesn't seem to have many, his attendant does have facial markings like Sukuna did. And now, it seems like Sukuna's title as the Fallen may have been more appropriate than we knew. One of this guy's attendants is hard to make out, but the shape of his head looks pretty similar to Master Tengen's. Tengen being the millennia-old immortal sorcerer who is also referred to as the Star and is responsible for a lot of Jujutsu culture. From there, we're introduced to a 6-year-old Yuka Okotsu. She was cheerfully smacking the top of Grandpa Yuta's head, which is hilarious on account of the whole brain swap thing. He was there for her crab-catching triumphs. He was also there for her fits of sadness. It was abundantly clear that Yuka was very attached to her grandpa. Eventually, Yuta wanted his granddaughter to inherit a certain ring. Apparently, she was interested in it before, but wondered if it was really okay to give it to her. After all, this was his treasure. Even so, he was worried that she might be a little too reckless. The ring was meant to look after her until she becomes a fully realized sorcerer. Yuta urged her to work hard, while Yuka enthusiastically agreed to do just that. Then 4 years later, our boy Yuta passed away. At his funeral, Yuka recounted how ever since her grandmother Maki died, Yuta seemed to be getting weaker and weaker by the day. Nobody expected Maki to pass on first, and Yuka was there with his casket even when everyone else went away. And there, she promised to become strong just like her grandpa. But that same day, her mother demanded Yuta's ring. Yuka didn't understand why. Yuka's mother explained that her brother Tsurugi would be receiving it. Yuka was outraged since the ring was given to her by her grandpa. But even so, the ring was still a cursed object that belonged to the Gojo clan. She claimed that Yuka didn't have the right to have it, as the ring was only suited for Tsurugi. Now, this mother's approach here is pretty inconsiderate and rude, so it's crazy to think that this is Maki and Yuta's daughter. Although, I guess it could just as easily be their father, who is related to Yuta and Maki. Later, Yuka stomped to her brother, demanding that he return the ring. She declared that it was really important to her and Yuta. That's when we're introduced to her 11-year-old brother, Tsurugi. But he couldn't help her since it wasn't his decision in the first place. Still demanding, Yuka raised a fist to take it back by force, and the beating could be heard from outside. Unfortunately, Yuka was the one who lost. In her frustration, Yuka dedicated herself to training. She would prove to everyone that she was the one worthy of their grandfather's ring. Elsewhere, an adult was asking a child if all kids play such retro games these days. The boy claimed that girls aren't very interested. The adult was surprised by how good he was, but the boy disagreed. He could only play for an hour a day. Meanwhile, his friends could play all day on the weekends, and his parents bought them a ton of DLC. While his parents were so mean that they only let him watch videos for half an hour a day. But soon enough, they lost, and the game was over. While the man had a controller, the kid was using an arcade-style gun. And on the floor, it looks like in the year 2086, they had the end of a Hunter x Hunter and One Piece fusion. Must be nice. The man questioned if young children should even be playing such games. The whole dying thing seemed pretty grim to him, but the boy assured him that it was perfectly normal. The man accepted that it should be fine if it's considered normal, but if that's the case, then the kid shouldn't have any reason to complain if it really happens to him. After that, we return to Yuka and Tsurugi, who are now 16 and 17. And they were joined by a man who may be the current assistant manager of Jujutsu High. He stressed how serious the recent abduction spree of Japanese citizens was. In Kyoto, kids were being taken to be used as energy resources, which certainly sounds like some sort of futuristic crisis. But since the police were having no luck with their tracking, sorcerer involvement was suspected. Yuka and Tsurugi would be joined by one other person. Together, they check out the scene and report anything they find to the higher-ups. Now, while Yuta and Maki are dead, we might actually know some of these higher-ups. After all, Wee Wee was still a kid during the culling game. Mei Mei even expected him to become the leader of the new Shadow style someday. But 68 years is a very long time, so any survivors will be very old. The siblings were introduced to the new phase. A boy with markings and a bandage on his forehead introduced himself as Marulu Valvolvelvori, and the end of his speech bubbles are clipped to differentiate him from humans, which is also the case with the other aliens that we've seen thus far. Yuka immediately pointed out how strange it is for him to be a sorcerer from another country. Maru had no idea why that was. That made Yuka incredulous. As an emotional energy unique to Japanese people, Jujutsu sorcerers were only born in Japan, although there were certainly exceptions to the rule. Hearing that, Maru understood why the Japanese were being targeted. The older man confirmed the high underworld value of Japanese bodies. Tsurugi was annoyed by the fact that Maru didn't even know the basics. He didn't want to go on a mission with a liability, while Yuka didn't really see the harm since they wouldn't be fighting curse users. Maru had no idea what curse users were. Tsurugi emphasized that there are no guarantees on a mission. He asked his sister if he'd need to spell everything out for her too. Yuka shouted back that if Maru gets in the way, they can just ditch him. But Tsurugi argued that by then, it would already be too late. And all the while, Maru was circling around them, asking about curse users. Eventually, they both barked at him. Tsurugi told him that they're just bad sorcerers, while Yuka told him to shut it or they'll leave him behind. Maru recoiled from the response, which was much louder than his own. Usami explained that Maru is a representative of the state party and is here to see Japanese sorcerers in the field. Tsurugi took the words in, but wondered what country the guy was from, while the explanation made sense to Yuka since they were told that there would be regular inspections after the signing of the security treaty. Maru more seriously expressed that he would be seeing what the two of them are made of. His real mission was to observe humans with powers similar to theirs and see if they can coexist with the Simurians. But he needed to be clear on one point, that the Okotsu siblings shouldn't rely on him under any circumstances, because he had orders from the higher-ups not to interfere. Yuka and Tsurugi took that as a reason to ditch him and ran away. Yuka didn't like how stuck up he seemed to be and leapt off the side of the bridge. Tsurugi felt the same way and did the same thing on the opposite side of the bridge, much to Maru's horror. Then the alien was all alone. He sat by himself with his head resting on folded arms. Yuka returned and told Maru that there's no reason for him to be crying. She didn't like the idea since it would make them seem like jerks. Maru couldn't believe how remorseless she was. Then his stomach growled. Soon after, the alien was painfully enjoying some takoyaki, which is a foreigner experience I can definitely relate to because I was not prepared for how scaldingly hot those things can be the first time I had them. And here we can see that aside from third eyes, Simurians also differ from humans when it comes to the design of their ears. Instead of being long like an elf's or something, they are double-sectioned. Yuka didn't understand why he was crying since it was some pretty run-of-the-mill takoyaki, which was a designation the shop owner wasn't too keen on. Maru had no idea it was so common. Yuka was a bit taken aback by his unawareness. They were even more common in Osaka. Maru was amazed by all that Japan had to offer. Yuka insisted that the boy pay her back for the food later. To that, he strongly apologized, which just made her question if he was going to pay her back or not. Afterwards, Maru explained his suspicion that Yuka and Tsurugi were siblings. He claimed that they were very similar, which Yuka protested. When Maru asked if the two of them don't get along, Yuka explained that her brother took her greatest treasure, although she couldn't exactly say that he stole it. She told Maru that the ring her brother wears around his neck was from their grandfather. It's an especially important cursed object from the Gojo clan, which only the best sorcerers are allowed to possess, and it was hers until her mother took it and gave it to Tsurugi. Maru asked if Tsurugi is really such an impressive sorcerer, but according to Usami, the siblings were pretty much on par with one another, the biggest difference between them being age. Yuka mentioned that her brother is a hard worker. Maru figured that would be a good thing, but that wasn't the point that Yuka was making. That much was obvious since all he does is work out like crazy. To Yuka, her brother just seemed to be begging for attention since he didn't want her to take the ring away. She abruptly stood up and mentioned that Tsurugi doesn't even have any memories with their grandpa, and she's working really hard too. So for some reason, Yuka was the only one who really had a close relationship with Yuta, despite being the younger sibling. So surely there's a reason for this. Whatever the case, Maru picked up on the souring mood. Brightly, he suggested that they finish the mission together. That way, they could show everyone how great Yuka really is. And since he's just the inspector, if they do it together, it'll be like Yuka finished the whole thing on her own. Hesitant, Yuka pointed out that working alone is forbidden. Maru had no idea that was the case. So I guess the higher-ups learned their lesson after Megumi botched the whole Sukuna finger thing. Even so, Yuka was still willing to do it, and her body language was just like her grandpa's. And to that, Maru had a beaming smile and shimmering eyes. Yuka brought up the fact that he's not allowed to help with the mission. Maru claimed that nobody would find out as long as he doesn't use cursed energy, which is a term he had to take a moment to remember. To Yuka, this guy's demeanor definitely set him apart from the rigid structure of Japanese sorcery. And with that, they approached the scene. The duo investigated their way through the city. And here we have our first glimpse at future technology, a bracelet with holographic projections, which is pretty advanced, yet tame enough to be believable. But unfortunately, they were having a hard time. Or at least Maru was, since he didn't know what to look out for. He also lied down on the street, unaware of how abnormal that behavior was. He was really surprised to learn that Yuka actually found something. She asked him which way he wants to turn at the end of the road. His answer was right, then left, then straight. Maru wondered what she was up to. Then Yuka passed him a holographic note, which makes me wonder if there's any sorcery involved in this technology because that is very impressive. Yuka guessed each direction Maru was going to pick and was correct each and every time. But Maru tossed the hologram and shouted that this wasn't the time for magic tricks. But Yuka had an explanation. She was sure that the road was being covered by a physical gaze manipulation along with a curse. That way, it could direct stray wanderers and curious children along the intended path. Yuka speculated that it could be the trigger to a barrier technique. one that traps anyone who follows the path in a certain sequence. Maru was appalled by the ploy and was fired up to protect the youth. He praised the young sorcerer and was sure that her greatness would definitely shine through to everyone else. Yuka basked in the praise, but was sure that any solid window could have figured it out, which is a person who can see curses but isn't a sorcerer. And again, Maru wasn't familiar with the term. That's when Tsurugi showed up. Maru was shocked to see him. The older Okotsu wondered where Maru had been slacking off. The alien was aghast since Tsurugi was the one who left him behind. And Tsurugi had already figured out the barrier situation himself. Maru was shocked again. Tsurugi told them to wait up while he fetches a tool for the job. They watched him go. With his head low, Maru apologized to Yuka since his plan didn't work out. But she wasn't too bothered. Instead, she wondered why he was. Maru explained that he has a brother of his own, a younger twin, which is the horizontal-eyed Samurian who we saw earlier on. Maru explained that the two of them don't get along, and although he's tried to work things out, it always goes poorly. Yuka wondered why the two are at odds. Maru said that there wasn't exactly a solid reason. It was mostly just his brother being annoyed by Maru's clumsiness, which Yuka could silently understand. Maru was hurt by their lack of mutual understanding, and even more hurt by the thought of it going on forever. He didn't want to see the Okotsu siblings end up the same way, so he hoped that he could help settle the whole ring thing. Yuka told him to quit projecting how he thinks siblings should be onto other people. Besides, it wasn't like this was unheard of for siblings. The two just stared at each other. Maru feared that Yuka couldn't pick up on subtle emotions at all. Yuka stated that she doesn't care about her brother as long as she can get the ring back, which is a very cold outlook and shows just how greatly she cherished her grandfather. Soon, they found the start of the path. Tsurugi already reported it, but it was time to close it off. With a bit of caution tape, even if they couldn't block each and every path, this much should be enough to disrupt the conditions of the barrier. And in just a bit of time, they were all done. But that didn't stop some dumb kid from running ahead anyway. They all reacted as quickly as they could. Tsurugi broke the tape while chasing and calling out to the kid. When the boy turned, two massive hands appeared in front of him. The trio was horrified. The giant hands squeezed around their target, then vanished with their prey. Tsurugi was tense. The person responsible must be pretty good if they are able to include spatial transference in a barrier technique. That said, they had been following the path exactly how it was laid out, so Tsurugi decided that he would go after the kid while the other two report to Usami. But Yuka insisted on going with him. When her brother refused, she demanded an explanation. Simply put, he planned on proving how much stronger he is than his sister. So now Yuka definitely wasn't leaving. Although the same thing couldn't be said about Tsurugi, as two hands now surrounded him. And he was gone just as quickly. Maru wondered why it only took Tsurugi as his sword clattered to the ground. Yuka quickly rationalized that the sword was left behind because it is a cursed tool, which meant that the barrier must be repelling anyone with too much cursed energy as a means of keeping sorcerers from breaking it. Now Maru was even more confused since Tsurugi is a sorcerer too. Yuka told him that despite being a sorcerer, her brother doesn't actually have any cursed energy, which is why he uses a cursed tool. So he is very similar to their grandmother Maki. Maru was unsettled by the irony of the savior becoming the victim, which somewhat derailed into a discussion about clever idioms, but Maru forced himself to get back on track, while Yuka wasn't nearly as moved. She decided that they should just go back to Usami like her brother wanted, report the situation, and call it a day. Maru was dumbfounded. He assumed that they would go help her brother, but it's not like they had a location in mind. But thankfully, Maru had a plan for that. Yuka didn't know what he had in mind, but also didn't see the point. She wasn't exactly motivated to go save someone who was pretty much just trash talking a moment ago. To her, this fate was deserved, and his katana being left behind just made him look that much worse. Maru asked her if Usami would be able to show up immediately. Yuka figured that the guy would be in Tokyo by now, although if a nearby sorcerer was free, she was sure they'd help out. Maru didn't think that was alright, and believed that they should handle it. This devolved into an argument between them. More seriously, Maru made it clear that if her brother dies, Yuka would regret it forever. Yuka stiffened at that. Maru knew that as long as Tsurumi was still alive, there was a chance for things to change between them. But if he dies, then that would be the end. Maru urged Yuka to trust her only sibling instead of cursing him. Yuka wasn't fond of the guy she just met pushing his ideals onto her, but Maru saw no problem with having ideals. In fact, if someone were to defy his ideals, then he would be the one hurt, not them. Continuing, he explained that he might even be humiliated, that it might hurt terribly, but at the end of the day, it's just pain, which tells us that he's familiar enough with the situation to make such a bold statement. This could also be him projecting. Failing the mission he's on could be humiliating, and even result in physical punishment. By his logic, there was no point in giving up on your ideals ahead of punishment or pain. Maru hasn't given up on his brother just yet, so he demanded that Yuka do the same with hers. Finally, Yuka admitted that she wouldn't go to save him. Maru seemed to deflate at that. But instead of giving up, Yuka was determined to give her brother a beatdown. That was good enough for Maru. Now that that was done, it was time to actually find him. Elsewhere, a man was mentioning how Kyoto's roads were arranged in a grid pattern. With Tsurugi tied up in his hideout, the man explained that his barrier technique was very well suited for such a layout. And here, Tsurugi has something around his neck that seems to be more future technology. Tsurugi labeled the man a fool for setting up shop so close to Jujutsu High, which was still going on strong apparently. But Tsurugi certainly wasn't in any position to talk. His bindings were actually included in the transference, so this was definitely an elaborate trap. Either way, the man actually planned on calling it quits with his underworld business. As a fellow sorcerer, the man was sure that Tsurugi was already in the know about how things were changing. Then the criminal was actually surprised by Tsurugi's unawareness. He simply said that aliens have arrived on Earth. Yeah, Tsurugi suddenly came to the conclusion that he was dealing with some sort of wacko conspiracy theorist. But the man was dead serious, albeit reluctantly. According to the Inspector General, this apparent invasion is considered to be a special grade incident. In fact, it's even on par with Sukuna's attack from 68 years ago, which I think is a pretty reasonable estimate. 50,000 unknown sorcerers with mysterious intentions and abilities is a terrifying prospect when sorcery is so rare on Earth. Just wait until Mahoraga turns out to be some bulky alien species. That had Tsurugi in an uproar since Sukuna was the monster who created Ground Zero at the inhuman Makyo, which is simply referring to the destruction of Shinjuku at the end of the series. The criminal was glad to see the kid knew his history. With the signing of the Kyoto Paranormal Security Treaty, diplomacy with the aliens is up to the Japanese. But the criminal was sure that cultural barriers across planets would be the cause of major strife. He believed that the aliens would wage war and invade Earth. And all the while, Maru's brother was shown to be observing the planet. So I imagine that while Maru is diplomatic and focused on coexistence with humanity, his brother may be more in favor of a more heavy-handed approach. The younger twin was certainly in a position of influence, and with his placement on the mission approved by the higher-ups, Maru probably holds a similar position himself. Either way, information is valuable, so Maru would be allowed to make his attempt while his brother prepares for presumed eventualities. On the human side, the criminal was sure that direct conflict would expose the truth about Japan. Tsurugi didn't know what he meant by that. The man was sure that he knew about the culling game that sparked the signing of the treaty. Satoru Gojo and Yuji Itadori were the legends who saved the world from Ryomen Sukuna 68 years ago. But these days, neither of these two could name anyone close to their levels. And Gojo and Yuji being placed in the same bracket here just goes to show how easily history can be distorted. The man was sure that once everyone realizes how weak modern sorcerers are, the shady energy business would be done for. The value of Japanese citizens would plummet, so he planned on getting out before then. His plan was to have Tsurugi be his final sale. Tsurugi realized that he was being kept alive for that reason. He asked if he and the kid would end up being a set. The seller coldly rejected that idea as the wall behind him lifted up. The boy had already been packaged and placed with the others, which was quite the chilling collection. Tsurugi was very disturbed by the sight. Although Tsurugi was lacking in the cursed energy department, a sorcerer would still do well at auction. The dealer admitted that he actually hates children and is very eager to get rid of them. Tsurugi mocked the man for being on the same societal level as kids. But at least they were cute. The comfortable criminal walked over barefoot. He kicked Tsurugi in the face. He didn't like how confident his captive was being, especially since they were in the old city district that's been abandoned for more than half a century. He sadistically begged the sorcerer to scream for help. There was no way anyone would come to his rescue. But that's when the metal door was launched and knocked him away. Yuka and Maru were here. Both Tsurugi and his captor were in disbelief. Before then, Maru took Yuka's hands into his own. He began by confirming that the two siblings were related by blood, which they are. With his so-called curse technique, Maru planned on bringing Yuka in harmony with the world. Apparently, his technique seeks balance. It would find the person who was an equal match for her, aka her brother. Using curse energy was definitely risky, but Maru assured her that just a little bit would be fine. So I'm guessing that Maru's powers are rooted in affinity and synergy. Since he's running around with the grandchildren of Yuta and Maki, I don't think Maru will need to be much of a powerhouse himself. On the other hand, fulfilling more of a support role would definitely round out their team. In the present, Tsurugi broke out of his bindings and told the scum to surrender. But before he could get any further, Yuka boldly interrupted. She suddenly challenged her brother to a fight. He had no idea what she was on about, and Maru couldn't believe that she was doing that now of all times. Yuka's posture stiffened while her nails and expression sharpened. Tsurugi was quick to respond. The siblings went blow for blow with a rapid succession of movements and strikes. Tsurugi parried each of Yuka's attacks. Then he threw one of his own. It connected and floored her, while Maru was still wrapping his head around their timing. Yuka was crying. Her brother was so strong that it was upsetting. But with how hard he's always working, she already knew that. And here, it seems like we have another One Piece reference, since this is a bit from Zoro's workout routine. Yuka quickly wiped away her tears. Now, she was on the same page as everyone else, and demanded that the villains stand down. Meanwhile, her brother was still confused. Yuka and the criminal eyed each other with serious expressions. Becoming more serious, Yuka clapped her hands and enveloped them in cursed energy. This is Savage Jaw Strike. She lashed out at the barrier user in a flash. He quickly realized that she was combining martial arts with cursed energy. He touched the talisman on the floor, and then he was behind Yuka and poised to strike. Thankfully, she managed to defend herself. It became clear to her that his barrier technique extended to the very room they were in. Annoyed, Tsurugi asked Maru to hand over his katana. From there, the criminal heard an alarming sound. The name of this sword is Honoyagi. The sparks from the scabbard and guard are actually infused into the blade. With that, he used new shadow style, Bato sword drawing, which was the move that Kasumi used a lot back in the day. But in this case, the sword itself was on fire and burnt away all the talismans that were forming the barrier. And Yuka wasn't done just yet. She struck him directly with a biting twist to the chest. She smiled, the villain threw up, and Tsurugi sighed. Oh, and Maru's hair was on fire. After a bit of time, Maru was able to confirm that all the kids were still alive, but they would all wait for some adults to show up before moving them. Tsurugi called out to his sister. He noted that she had gotten stronger. She looked at him a bit surprised. Still looking ahead, he let her know that he would do the same. That way, he would be able to return the ring to her. And that's when we'd see Tsurugi's early perspective. He spoke to his granny Maki while building sandcastles, catching snakes, and crying over scrapes. During their training, an elderly Maki told him that they were actually very similar. She claimed that he also becomes strong through loss, but since that's a double-edged sword, he needed to be cautious. She stressed the fact that leaving things would be important for him too, although he didn't quite understand what she meant. While at their grandparents' home, Tsurugi overheard Yuka being given their grandfather's ring. Later, while Maki was pushing him on the swing, Tsurugi was pouting since he wanted a ring too. Maki explained that the ring was a protective charm that would ward off danger, so Tsurugi wouldn't need it. And that's because he is already strong. And that more than appeased the little boy. But years later, after Yuta's funeral, Tsurugi's mother gave him the ring anyway. When he asked her why, she claimed that he would need it the most, presumably because he lacked cursed energy. When he tried to refuse, she clarified that this was the decision the Gojo clan had come to. What Tsurugi wanted didn't matter at all. Later, the boy angrily raced through a field. Granny Maki trained him herself, so he was sure that he didn't need some stupid charm, and he would prove it to everyone. With tears streaming, he swore that he would prove himself as Maki's grandson. And in the meanwhile, he could only apologize to his sister for holding on to her prized possession until then. And since he wears the ring as a necklace, it's unlikely to actually be of any use until it's worn properly. In the present, Yuka began to question what her brother meant about returning the ring, but was cut off. The bound criminal had woken up and was cursing the fools around him. While Tsurugi was downplaying his statement, the criminal was plotting their demise. Darkness spilled out from his body and spread all around them. Frantic, the siblings realized that the guy's barrier extended to the room with the kids in it too. He was planning on transferring just the children. The sicko claimed to have already found himself a buyer. In response, an eye slowly began to open. Maru revealed his third eye with intense concentration. The seller's eyes widened when he saw it, and the world seemed to dim around him like a moment within Gojo's domain expansion. And in an instant, the man collapsed. Yuka hesitated before asking what exactly that was, while Tsurugi made just the right leap in logic. He remembered what the guy said about the world changing. Then he asked Maru if he's an alien, as the extraterrestrial nervously covered his forehead. Now, when it comes to the dealer already having a buyer, we have aliens in this chapter, and we have abductions. It just makes sense for the two of them to be connected. So while Maru is playing friendly alien, his brother seems to be the scary probing type. This was an excellent first chapter. The artist for this series is Yuji Iwasaki. The art style reminds me a bit of the series Case Closed, but has definitely been refined for shonen. I really hope that more collaborations like this one come to be in the future. This story in particular will be a shorter one and is expected to last for about 6 months. The name of this series, Modulo, is interesting since it points to modular arithmetic. Very simply put, moduli are considered to be constants or coefficients that express the extent that something contains something else. So as it relates to this series, that could be how much cursed energy the Sorcerers of Earth possess. It can also be what's left over from integer division. The Simurians consider themselves to be refugees, so they may have fled their homeworld and been reduced to their current numbers, which only begs the question as to what they were fleeing from. There is so much intrigue, so much hype, so much to look forward to with this series that I hope you guys are here for the next one as well. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.